right, let's go ahead and get started here with 5.2. So for 5.2, we're going to need to recall the information we learned yesterday in 5.1, which is the definition here of median, altitude, angle bisector, and perpendicular bisector. So quick recap here. Medians create a midpoint, okay? Remember those M's. Medians create a midpoint. So if we were to have a median here, if CM is the median, that tells us that AM is congruent to MB. Because M is the midpoint. So these two segments here would be congruent. Altitudes, remember, altitudes create right angles, okay? So they come down from the vertex and they are perpendicular to the opposite side. So wherever the altitude lands, that is where the right angle will be. So always remember, altitudes create right angles. Angle bisectors, we talked a lot about those in the past. Angle bisectors here create two congruent angles, splits an angle completely in half. So here are angle AC. If this was E here, this would be ACE, angle ACE, congruent to angle BCE. All right. So remember, angle bisectors create two congruent angles there. And perpendicular bisector, that's kind of an all-in-one type of deal. So perpendicular bisectors not only create a right angle on the side that they land, but they also create two congruent segments. So perpendicular bisectors there will create a right angle as well as a midpoint. So we'll have two congruent segments there. So let's see how we use these in geometry. So first question here says, if BD is a median, solve for Y. Well, let's go ahead and check what a median is. Remember, a median is going to create a midpoint, right? Medians are going to create a midpoint. So if this is a midpoint here at point D, that tells us that AD is congruent to DC, right? So AD is congruent to DC. So since I know both of these segments here are congruent, what I can do is I can take those segments and I can set them equal to each other. So since AD is congruent to DC, that means that AD, which is 5y minus 10, will equal DC, which is 2y plus 8, okay? So since we have the segment AD, we have the segment DC, we can plug those in there and just solve for y. So when we plug these in, we're going to subtract a 2y from both sides. That is going to give us 3y minus 10 is equal to 8. Go ahead, add a 10 to both sides. So 3y equals 18. And we'll divide both sides here by 3. We're going to get y is equal to 6. Okay, so when we solve for y, what we did was we saw that both of our segments here were congruent because of the median, and we solved for y that way. Okay, number two says if BD is an altitude, solve for y. So key word here, altitude. Let's go ahead and figure out what that is. The altitude of a triangle creates a right angle. Okay, so I know for a fact here that BD is going to create a right angle. So not only will this angle be a right angle, but so will this angle, okay? Remember, if it creates one right angle, it has to create two right angles. See, this is a straight line here. ADC is a straight line. So if one of these angles is 90, then the other angle also must be 90. Now I'm going to erase this here just so we can see this a little bit better. It tells us right here that angle BDC is 4y plus 10. Well, we know that angle BDC is actually equal to 90. So what we're going to do is we are going to say angle BDC is equal to 90. And now we're going to plug in what our value for angle BDC is. So they say that angle BDC is 4y plus 10. So we will say here 4y plus 10 equals 90. And we're going to just go ahead and solve for y. So subtract a 10 from both sides here and then divide by 4. So 4y equals 80. After we divide both sides by 4, we're going to get y is equal to 20. Okay, y is equal to 20. So that's what we get there for number 2. We get y equals 20. Let's go ahead and move on to our next question here. So again, it says find x if GT is a median. So key word here is a median. We already know what that is. Medians create a midpoint. So if this is a midpoint, that tells us FT is going to be congruent to TE. FT is congruent to TE. And all we need to do here is we just need to take FT. We need to take TE, set them equal to each other. So FT, 3x minus 2, TE is 10. So 3x minus 2 is equal to 10. Add a 2 to both sides here. We get 3x equals 12. We'll divide both sides by 3, and we're going to get x equals 4. Okay, x equals 4. So since GT was a median, we said, hey, we know that medians create midpoints. Therefore, 3x minus 2 and 10, those are equal to each other. Okay. Number 4, assume SV bisects angle RST. If the measure of angle RST is equal to 60, solve for x. Alrighty. So RST is the angle we're talking about here. And we know that that full angle is 60 because that's what the question tells us. So this whole thing is 60. And then it says bisects angle RST. Anytime it says bisects angle, that is an angle bisector. Okay, that's an angle bisector. Anytime it says we bisect an angle, that's an angle bisector. So flipping back here, figuring out what an angle bisector is, it says an angle bisector is a ray from the vertex of the angle into the interior of the angle, forming two congruent angles. Okay, two congruent angles. So in this example here, we said, hey, since this is an angle bisector, this angle is congruent to this angle. We're going to do the exact same thing here in number 4. We're going to say here, if we know that this angle was bisected, then that means that RSV, angle RSV right here, is going to be congruent to angle TSV. Okay, angle TSV. So these two angles here are congruent. Now, the question is here, if we know that the full angle was 60 before it was bisected, and we know that an angle bisector cuts that angle in half, what do we know that each of these are, right? If we know that 60 was cut in half, what would each of these angles be? And hopefully you're at home saying, well, they would both be 30. That is correct. Okay, they're both going to be 30. So if we know that angle RSV is equal to 30, right? RSV is equal to 30. And we know that for angle RSV here, they say it's x plus 5. We're just going to plug that in for RSV. So RSV, they said, is x plus 5. And x plus 5 is going to be equal to 30. Okay? So basically what we did is we said, hey, this whole angle is 60. This is an angle bisector, so both of these are 30. They tell us that one of these smaller angles here is x plus 5. Well, we know that x plus 5 is supposed to be equal to what the angle is equal to, which is 30. So we set those two equal to each other and solve for x. So x is going to equal 25. Okay, x is going to equal 25. On to number 5 here. Number 5 says assume TX is an angle bisector and the measure of angle STV is equal to 4x minus 16. Find x. Okay, so again, we have another angle bisector here. So I'm just going to go ahead and mark this because we know that an angle bisector is going to give us two congruent angles. So STX, VTX, those two angles will be congruent. It tells us that the measure of angle STV, which is this full angle, STV is 4x minus 16. So the full angle is 4x minus 16. Part of the angle is x plus 12. Okay. So if we know here that this left angle is x plus 12, and we know that the left angle is congruent to the right angle, we would know that the right angle is also equal to x plus 12. So I'm going to draw a little arrow right here. X plus 12 would also be this small angle here. And if we were to add both of these angles together, if we take the small angle plus the small angle, that's going to equal the full angle. Okay? That's going to equal the full angle. So if we said angle STX, which would be this angle right here that x plus 12 is drawn to, plus VTX, angle VTX, really, all we did here is we took our two small angles, STX and VTX, and we're adding them together. When we add those two small angles together, that's going to give us the full angle. So angle STV. So small angle plus small angle equals full angle. We know what all of these values are, so we're going to plug those in. So STX we said was x plus 12. VTX was also x plus 12, right? Because they were the same thing. Angle bisector makes those two angles the same thing. So x plus 12 plus x plus 12 is equal to angle STV. And in the question here, they tell us that STV is equal to 4x minus 16. So this is how we set this question up. Again, much like a lot of the geometry we do, that's the most important step. These first two steps here, us being able to say this is what we want to focus on. Everything else from here is just algebra. The biggest focus of today, again, is these first two steps. So x plus 12 plus x plus 12, we got to combine these like terms. So when we combine like terms here, we see that there are two x's. So that's going to be a 2x. Then we're going to combine our non-x's, so our 12s here. So 12 plus 12 is 24. And that is all equal to 4x minus 16. Okay. From here, go ahead, subtract your smaller x. So subtract a 2x from both sides. This is going to be 24 is equal to 2x minus 16. We can go ahead and add that 16 to both sides and then divide by 2. So adding a 16 to both sides here is going to be 40 equals 2x. Divide both sides here by 2, and x is going to equal 20. X is going to equal 20, okay? So again, the biggest thing there was these first two steps. So we've got to understand angle bisectors cut our angles in half. So whatever the small angle is, the other small angle will also be the same thing, okay? So we noticed that if one side or one angle is x plus 12, the other angle must be x plus 12. We know that if we add the two small angles together, that they are going to equal the full angle. So we said x plus 12 plus x plus 12 is equal to 4x minus 16. All right, number 6 here. So number 6 says that AC is a median. Find DE. So median there is our key word, and it says AC. So I know C is a little tough to find here, but that is C. So AC here is a median. That tells us that it creates a midpoint. So you should know here, if C is our midpoint, that means this half is congruent to this half. But I want us to look at this half over here. So DBC, this is 1 plus x. And if you notice here, DC is actually equal to these two segments. We don't just have one segment here. We have two segments. We have DB and we have BC. Okay, so right off the bat here, I just want to make this clear. DC is actually equal to DB plus BC, okay, because there are 3 letters over here, so we have to make sure we include each segment. So just so you know here, CE is going to be congruent to the entire segment of DC, which is DB plus BC. All right, so now we've got 2 congruent segments. So what we can say here is we can say that DC is congruent to CE. DC is congruent to CE. And now what we need to do is we need to basically take all of these segments here and set them equal. So I'm going to do one further step because I want to show you where this DC is coming from, where all these numbers are coming from. So I'm actually going to rewrite this. This is DB plus BC. And I wanted to say equals CE. So really all I've done so far is I took DC out and I put DB plus BC in. And now we're just going to use all of our values that we have for these. So DB is 4x minus 6. BC is 1 plus x. And CE is x plus 7. Okay, so we wanted to combine all of these like terms here. That way we could see what x is going to equal. So let's go ahead and combine our x's first, 4x and 1x. That's going to give us a 5x. Negative 6, positive 1, that's going to give us a negative 5. So 5x minus 5 is equal to x plus 7. Go ahead, subtract your smaller x first. So after we subtract our smaller x first, this is going to be 4x minus 5 is equal to 7. We can go ahead and add a 5 here and divide by 4. So 4x equals 12. Divide both sides by 4, and x is going to equal 3. Okay, so x equals 3. That's good to know. We had to find DE, right? So that's only about half the work. We now need to plug in x for all of these segments. So if we wanted to find DE, this full segment, that would be DB plus BC plus CE. So all 3 of these segments. Now, I don't have much room here, so I am going to have to erase a little bit. I'm going to erase this top part, pretty much leave everything but x equals 3. So we know that x is equal to 3. We've got to find DE. And looks like DE, if we just added up all of these segments along the way, this is going to be 4x minus 6 plus 1 plus x plus 7. Okay, so we have something that looks like this. We can go ahead and plug in our x equals 3 for this. So this would read 4 times x, or 4 times 3, minus 6 plus 1 plus our x, which is 3, plus our x again, which is 3, plus 7. Okay, so I know this is a lot of work. 4 times 3 here is 12. So I'm just going to rewrite this whole thing with our new number here. So if I just go in order, 12 minus 6 here is 6, plus 1 would be 7, plus 3 would be 10, plus 3 would be 13, plus 7 more is going to be 20. Okay, so we are going to get that DE is equal to 20. So a lot of work there, but most of that was caused because of this extra segment. Okay, if it wasn't for that extra segment, that would have gone a lot smoother, but we had to account for that extra segment being in there. All right, question 7 here. It says QRS is an equilateral, solve for x and y. So QRS is an equilateral, solve for x and y. Now, if we know that this side here, RS, is 5x plus 5, and we know this side here is 2x plus 20, and we know that this is an equilateral triangle. What do we know about these sides? Well, we know that these sides are congruent, right? So we know that these sides are congruent. So we know 2x plus 20, we know 5x plus 5 is going to be the same. Over here, that side right there would also be equal to the rest of these sides in an equilateral triangle. So what we can say here is we can say RS is congruent to QS. Then go ahead and plug in our values. So since they're equal to each other, we will set these sides equal. So 5x plus 5 is equal to 2x plus 20. Go ahead and solve for x here. Subtract a 2x from both sides. This is going to be 3x plus 5 equals 20. Subtract the 5 from both sides and then divide by 3. So 3x equals 15. Divide both sides there by 3. We'll get x equals 5. Now, we've got 10y plus 20, right? 10y plus 20. They don't give us any other angles. If we know this is an equilateral triangle here, we know that all 3 of these angles are going to be the same. Now, if they don't give us any other angles, but we know in fact that 10y plus 20 is going to be the same for all 3 angles, this is what we're going to do. We can add up all 3 of our angles. We could say this is also 10y plus 20. This is also 10y plus 20. And we could solve for y by adding all 3 of our 10y plus 20s and setting them equal to 180. Okay. Another way that we could write this, instead of adding them all up, we could just say that 3 times our 10y plus 20 equals 180. So instead of adding up all 3 of them, we just multiply it by 3. All right, that's the same thing. We would get the same thing no matter which way we do it. So if we distribute this 3 through here, this is going to be 30y plus 60 equals 180. Go ahead, subtract a 60 from both sides, and then divide by 30. So 30y is going to equal 120. We divide both sides here by 30, and we are going to get that y equals 4. Okay, so two answers there, x and y. That's how we solve for both of those. Last one, number 8. Number 8 is a perpendicular bisector. Okay, so we haven't dealt with one of those. Let's go check out our definition to make sure we know what that is. So perpendicular bisector not only is going to give us a right angle, hence the perpendicular part of this, but it's also going to give us a midpoint. Okay, it's also going to give us a midpoint. So not only are we going to have a right angle, but we're going to have two congruent segments. So starting this off, we do have a right angle at point D, and we are going to have two congruent segments right next to that right angle. Okay, AD is going to be congruent to DC, so we know that we can write that down right off the bat. AD is congruent to DC. Okay, solving for this, all we're going to do is we're going to take those values, plug them into what we have so far. So we're going to take AD, we're going to say 6R plus 4 equals 22 plus 3R. Okay, that's how we're going to solve this for R. So go ahead, subtract your smaller variable here, subtract the 3R from both sides. This is going to be 3R plus 4 equals 22. Subtract a 4 from both sides, and 3R is equal to 18. Last step here, divide both sides by 3. R is going to equal 6. All right, so we got R. Now we've got to solve for X. Okay, now there's going to be some questions here on how to do this, because we know that this is X minus 8. We know that this is 8X plus 12. But what is that angle right there? What is that angle right there? Hopefully you guys understand from when we talked about this earlier. If we have a right angle on one side and we have a straight line, we have to have a right angle on the other side as well. Okay, so we have to have a right angle over here as well. So we could say that angle BDC is a right angle, which is 90 degrees. We know that this is X minus 8. We know that this is 8X plus 12. So we can solve this by adding these three angles up and setting them equal to 180. Again, don't have much room here, so I do want to give myself some more room. I'm just going to leave everything but that R equals 6 there. So we're going to take X minus 8. We're going to add 8X plus 12. We're going to add our third angle here, which is that right angle. So 90 is equal to 180. Okay, X minus 8 plus 8X plus 12 plus 90 equals 180. So combining like terms here, combine our x's, that's going to give us 9x. If we combine our non-x's, negative 8, positive 12, positive 90, that's going to give us a positive 94. So 9x plus 94 is equal to 180. We can go ahead and subtract that 94. So 9x is going to equal 86. 9x is going to equal 86. Divide both sides here by 9. And we're going to get x equals 9.5. We're going to get x equals 9.55 repeating. Okay. All right, so x equals 9.55 repeating. That is our final answer there. So our two answers for the last question here was r equals 6 and x equals 9.55 repeating. I hope this makes sense to you guys. If you guys have any questions, send me an email.